Good evening. Here I am with Christian Henry Tobler, of course, my brother, Carl Johnson, the organizer of this event. Now, gentlemen, of course, you're very versed with the life and history and writings of Edgar Allan Poe. What about the paranormal aspect? Of course, we've heard some things have happened in Providence. There's actually been some sightings because of his connections in Providence with Sarah Helen Whitman, and he did spend some time here in Providence, Rhode Island.
Well, I don't think Poe was too much a subscriber to the paranormal or the supernatural or the preternatural, as they called it in his day.
Didn't he say something, quoted along the lines of, I've never believed in ghosts, but I've been frightened of them all my life?
As so many of us can say, yes. Well, perhaps he frightens himself now because the spectral form, the image of Edgar Allan Poe, has been seen seated on the steps of the Athenaeum Library, the Providence Athenaeum. Now, when a couple of people say that, you figure it's fancy, but when that tradition continues through decades and people swear by it, and there's even kind of a blurry photograph, but it's still something strange, photograph of Poe's ghost on the steps of the Athenaeum, I think there might be something to it. See, this was a very emotional time for Poe when he was in Providence, as was all the errors of his life, but Edgar Allan Poe was courting the eccentric poetess and heiress Sarah Helen Powers Whitman, and they would tryst, they would meet in secret at the Providence Athenaeum because her parents did not approve of their union. And perhaps Poe is still courting her, perhaps that's why he comes back, but he's been seen at the Athenaeum.
What about the story about a retired college professor from Brown University, I think, supposedly saw him on the steps of some building on Benefit Street, or somebody that very much resembled Edgar Poe?
Yes, I had heard about that. So it's a wide spectrum of people who have seen Poe. It's not just, teenagers with backpacks. I saw Poe! But a few people have. The college professor you mentioned, and I don't know the details of his sighting except that he was very serious about it. He saw someone that resembled Edgar Allan Poe strolling on Benefit Street, and the Providence Athenaeum runs along Benefit Street.
It's interesting, Keith, though, that we associate in our culture Edgar Allan Poe and his works with the supernatural, and of course the symbolism of the raven is so much a part of Halloween paraphernalia, and yet the raven is not a supernatural poem. It's a poem actually about despair.
Yes.
He's not really being haunted by this raven. The raven is simply a mirror of his personal despair. And most of the things we find creepy in Poe's stories aren't overtly involved with the supernatural, but really with madness and the plans and the cracks in the plans of madmen. The telltale heart, where the protagonist, if we can call him that, gives himself away to the authorities because he begins fancying that he hears the heart beating. Obviously, he isn't really. This is his conscience playing upon him.
Yes.
So it's Poe has a certain kind of majesty and magic to him in that he makes us think about the supernatural without usually even really delving into it, and that's a very compelling thing.
Because he felt murky recesses of the human psyche were perhaps more haunting than specters, or more obvious and scary, but get inside someone's mind, of the haunted mind. That's somewhat more disturbing, because then you say that could happen to me sometime.
Yes.
And instead, after this is the second Edgar Allan Poe tribute we presented at the Providence Public Library. It's a splendid setting with very amenable acoustics, for one thing, with their stage. And after the Poe tribute, some people have reported seeing a raven flitting through the halls of the Providence Public Library.
I don't believe it.
You don't say.
They say that. I mean,
I have to see that to actually believe it.
You would? Okay. Well, I don't necessarily believe that either, but people, if a few people say it, I'm interested in it. It shows that they were receptive to our program anyway.
And it probably only would show up on very special film, even if there was something like that.
Yeah, and under certain conditions, I think.
Well, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
A wonderful presentation.
Thank you very
for
much.
your information.
Yes, thank you. And good luck with the ongoing workings of E111 and your investigations and your show, Ghosts R N.E.A.R.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Are you going to be on the show?
Pardon?
Are we going to be on Ghosts R N.E.A.R?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, you are going to be on Ghosts R N.E.A.R. This is Keith Johnson coming to you from the Providence Public Library, Ghosts R N.E.A.R. And so are ravens.
Nevermore.
Vigil. Alone in a tranquil twilight, a distant church bell tolls. The wind forms a ghostly choir to summon lost and wayward souls. Snow drifts down from the heavens like ghosts lost in the night, and ice crystals cling to trees to set the woods aglow with light. Along a forgotten forest path there stands an ark of ancient stone, and amidst the hallowed ruins a solemn figure stands alone. Snow comes to rest on raven's wings, covering black quills in ivory white, and peace settles upon the earth beneath the ebon shroud of autumn's night. Welcome to An Hour in Providence with Edgar Allan Poe. At this time, it is my distinct pleasure to welcome Christian Henry Tobler, who has traveled here from Oxford, not Oxford, England, but Oxford, Connecticut. We have someone who's traveled here from Indiana, drove it all in one straight line. So I want to dedicate this program to Lana.
Lo, 'tis a gala night within the lonesome latter years. An angel throng, bewinged, bedight in veils and drowned in tears, sit in the theater to see a play of hopes and fears, while the orchestra breathes fitfully the music of the steers. Mimes in the form of God on high mutter and mumble low, and hither and thither fly, mere puppets they who come and go at bidding of vast formless things that shift the scenery to and fro, flapping from out their condor wings in visible woe. That motley drama, oh, to be sure it shall not be forgot, with its phantom chased forevermore by a crowd that sees it not, though through a circle that ever returneth into the self-same spot, and much of madness and more of sin and horror the soul of the plot. But see amid the mimic rout a crawling shape intrude, a blood-red thing that writhes from out the scenic solitude. It writhes, with mortal pangs the mimes become its food, and seraphs sob at vermin fangs and human gore imbued. Out are the lights, out all, and over each quivering form the curtain, a funeral pall, comes down with the rush of a storm, while the angels, all pallid and wan, uprising, unveiling, affirm that the play is the tragedy, man, and its hero, the conqueror worm.
Thy soul shall find itself alone, mid dark thoughts of the gray tombstone. No one of all the crowd to pry into thine hour of secrecy. Be silent in that solitude, which is not loneliness, for then the spirits of the dead who stood in life before thee are again in death around thee, and their will shall overshadow thee. Be still. The night, though clear, shall frown, and the stars shall not look down from their high thrones in heaven, with light like hope to mortals given. But their red orbs without beam to thy weariness shall seem as a burning and a fever, which would cling to thee forever. Now our thoughts thou shalt not banish, now our visions ne'er to vanish. From thy spirit shall they pass no more like dewdrops from the grass. The breeze, the breath of God is still, and the mist upon the hill, shadowy, yet unbroken, is a symbol and a token. How it hangs upon the trees, a mystery of mysteries.
Thank you.
It was many and many a year ago, in a kingdom by the sea, that a maiden lived there, who you might know by the name of Annabel Lee.
And this maiden, she lived with no other thought than to love and be loved by me.
I was a child, and she was a child, in this kingdom by the sea, but we loved with a love that was more than love, I and my Annabel Lee.
With a love that the winged seraphs of heaven coveted her and me.
And this was the reason that long ago, in this kingdom by the sea, a wind blew out of a cloud, chilling my beautiful Annabel Lee, so that her highborn kinsman came and bore her away from me.
To shut her up in a sepulchre in this kingdom by the sea.
The angels not half so happy in heaven, went envying her and me. Yes, that was the reason, as all we know, in this kingdom by the sea.
That the wind came out of the cloud by night, chilling and killing my Annabel Lee.
But our love, it was stronger by far than the love of those who were older than we, of many far wiser than we, and neither the angels in heaven above, nor the demons down under the sea
Can ever dissever my soul from the soul of the beautiful Annabel Lee.
For the moon never beams without bringing the dreams of the beautiful Annabel Lee, and the stars never rise, but I feel the bright eyes of the beautiful Annabel Lee. And so, all the night tide, I lie down by the side of my darling, my life and my bride.
In her sepulchre, there by the sea, in her tomb, by the sounding sea.
While the air is chill, the land groans still, on the ground lies a pall of snow. Let us raise a toast to the wayward ghost of Edgar Allan Poe. As the city sleeps, there's a soul who weeps, and perhaps no one will know. If we gather round, you may hear the sound. It's Edgar Allan Poe. Nightmarish tales, madness assails, mysteries, malice prevailing. Look beyond the veil when the moon is pale, to peer through the lamplight's glow. Find him pining there for a lady fair. He's Edgar Allan Poe. Thank you.
Hear the tolling of the bells, iron bells. What a world of solemn thought their monody compels. In the silence of the night, how we shiver with affright at the melancholy menace of their tone. For every sound that floats from the rust within their throats is a groan. And the people, the people, they that dwell up in the steeple all alone, and who tolling in that muffled monotone, feel a glory so enrolling on the human heart a stone. They are neither man nor woman, they are neither brute nor human, they are ghouls. And their king it is who tolls as he rolls a paean from the bells. And his merry bosom swells with the paean of the bells, and he dances and he yells, keeping time in a sort of runic rhyme to the paean of the bells, keeping time in a sort of runic rhyme to the throbbing of the bells, bells, to the sobbing of the bells, keeping time as he knells, in a happy runic rhyme to the tolling of the bells, bells, to the tolling of the bells, bells, to the moaning and the groaning of the bells.
We had passed through walls of piled bones, with casks and puncheons intermingling, into the inmost recesses of the catacombs. I paused again, and this time I made bold to seize Fortunato by the arm above the elbow. "The nitre, I say! See, it increases! It hangs like moss upon the vaults. We are below the river's bed. The drops of moisture trickle among the bones. Come, we will go back ere it is too late. Your cough." "It is nothing," he said. "Let us go on. But first, another draught of the Medoc." I broke and reached him a flagon of de Grave. He emptied it at a breath. His eyes flashed with a fierce light. He laughed and threw the bottle upward with a gesticulation I did not understand. I looked at him in surprise. He repeated the movement, a grotesque one. "You do not comprehend?" he said. "Not I replied. "Then you are not of the Brotherhood." "How? You are not of the Masons?" Yes, I said. Yes. "You? Impossible. A Mason?" "A Mason," I replied. "A sign," he said. "It is this," I answered, producing a trowel from beneath the folds of my roquelaire. "You jest," he exclaimed, recoiling a few paces. "But let us proceed to the Amontillado."
We're now going to present a recitation of Edgar Allan Poe's signature verse, The Raven. Now, go back into the 1840s, a dark chamber, the only illumination, a few meager candles, and the fire in his hearth. He's in his study. He's trying to calm himself so that he might sleep. He's going through his library, looking through some of his old books, and just trying to find some respite from the suffering, the loneliness, the loss he's feeling. So we are in this man's chamber. He is alone.
Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered, weak and weary, over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, while I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as of someone gently rapping at my chamber door. "'Tis some visitor," I muttered, tapping at my chamber door. "Only this and nothing more." Ah, distinctly I remembered. It was in the bleak December, and each separate dying ember wrought its ghost upon the floor. Eagerly I wished the morrow, vainly I had sought to borrow from my books surcease of sorrow, sorrow for the lost Lenore, for the rare and radiant maiden whom the angels name Lenore, nameless here forevermore. And the silken, sad, uncertain rustling of each purple curtain thrilled me, filled me with fantastic terrors never felt before, so that now, to still the beating of my heart, I stood repeating, "'Tis some visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door, some late visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door. This it is, and nothing more." Presently my soul grew stronger, hesitating then no longer. "Sir," said I, "or madam, truly your forgiveness I implore. But the fact is I was napping, and you so gently you came rapping, and so faintly you came tapping at my chamber door, that I scarce was sure I heard you. Here I opened the door. Darkness there, and nothing more." Deep into that darkness peering, long I stood there wondering, fearing, doubting, dreaming dreams no mortal ever dared to dream before. But the silence was unbroken, and the stillness gave no token, and the only word there spoken was the whispered word, "Lenore?" This I whispered, and an echo murmured back the word, "Lenore." Merely this, and nothing more. Back into the chamber turning, all my soul within me burning, soon again I heard a tapping, somewhat louder than before. "Surely," said I, "surely that is something at my window lattice. Let me see then what thereat is, and this mystery explore. Let my heart be still a moment, and this mystery explore. 'Tis the wind and nothing more." Open here, I flung the shutter, when, with many a flirt and flutter, in there stepped a stately raven of the saintly days of yore. Not the least obeisance made he, not a minute stopped or stayed he, but with mien of lord or lady, perched above my chamber door, perched upon a bust of Pallas, just above my chamber door, perched and sat, and nothing more. Then this ebony bird beguiling my sad fancy into smiling, by the grave and stern decorum of the countenance it wore. "Though thy crest be shorn and shaven, thou," I said, "art shirt no craven, ghastly grim and ancient raven wandering from the nightly shore. Tell me what thy lordly name is on the night's Plutonian shore." Quoth the raven, "Evermore." Much I marveled this ungainly fowl to hear discourse so plainly, though its answer little meaning, little relevancy bore. For we cannot help agreeing that no living human being ever yet was blessed with seeing bird above his chamber door, bird or beast upon the sculptured bust above his chamber door, with such name as Nevermore. But the raven, sitting lonely on the placid bust, spoke only that one word, as if his soul in that one word he did outpour. Nothing farther than he uttered, not a feather than he fluttered, till I scarcely more than muttered, "Other friends have flown before. On the morrow he will leave me, as my hopes have flown before." Then the bird said, "Nevermore." Startled at the stillness broken, by reply so aptly spoken, "Doubtless," said I, "what it utters is its only stock and store, caught from some unhappy master whom unmerciful disaster followed faster, till his songs one burden bore, till the dirges of his hope that melancholy burden bore of nevermore." But the raven still beguiling my sad fancy into smiling,
Straight I wheeled a cushioned seat in front of bird and bust and door. Then upon the velvet sinking, I betook myself to think linking, fancy unto fancy thinking, what this ominous bird of yore, what this grim, ungainly, ghastly, gaunt, and ominous bird of yore meant in croaking nevermore. This I sat engaged in guessing, but no syllable expressing, to the fowl whose fiery eyes now burned into my bosom's core. This and more I sat divining, with my head at ease reclining, on the cushion's velvet lining that the lamplight gloated o'er, but whose velvet violet lining with the lamplight gloating o'er, she shall press, nevermore. Then methink the air grew denser, perfumed from an unseen censer, swung by seraphim whose footfalls tinkled on the tufted floor. Wretch, I cried, thy God hath lent thee, by thy angels he hath sent thee, respite, and nepenthe from thy memories of Lenore. Quaff, oh quaff this kind nepenthe, and forget this lost Lenore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Prophet, said I, thing of evil, prophet still if bird or devil, whether tempter sent or whether tempest toss thee here ashore, desolate yet all undaunted, on this desert land enchanted, on this home by horror haunted, tell me truly I implore, is there balm in Gilead? Tell me I implore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Prophet, said I, thing of evil, prophet still if bird or devil, by that heaven that bends above us, by that God we both adore, tell this soul with sorrow laden, if within the distant Aden it shall clasp a sainted maiden who the angels name Lenore, clasp a rare and radiant maiden who the angels name Lenore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Be that word our sign of parting, bird or fiend, I shrieked upstarting, get thee back into the tempest and the night's Plutonian shore. Leave no black plume as a token of thy lie that soul hath spoken. Leave my loneliness unbroken, quit the bust above my door. Take thy beak from out my heart and take thy form from off my door. Quoth the raven, nevermore. And the raven, never flitting, still is sitting on the pallid bust of Pallas just above my chamber door. And his eyes have all the seeming of a demon's that is dreaming, and the lamplight o'er him streaming throws his shadow on the floor. And my soul from out that shadow that lies floating on the floor shall be lifted nevermore.
I believe this structure was erected in 1841, so Edgar Allan Poe would have paused here, and because it was an active military fortress then, and an armory. So Edgar Allan Poe would have found this site significant. There's no doubt that Edgar Allan Poe paused here. And maybe we'll see him again before this walk is over. In fact, she was a widow. And she was tending her rose garden. As I mentioned, Miss Whitman was an eccentric and a poetess, which being a poet back then was eccentric enough. And she would wear veils. In fact, children would follow after Sarah Helen Whitman, picking up the veils as she walked by.
So here we are on Benefit Street on the east side of Providence. And apparently there has been a sighting of the shade of Mr. Poe himself. Does anybody know anything about that?
You've read up on it, Nathan?
Yeah, I heard a story about a school teacher or professor of some type walking towards the Athenaeum and seeing a guy laying down on the steps and kicked him to get him out of the way because he looked like a bum. So the guy turned around, turned his head, and the professor was like taken aback, and he saw him, I think, vanish, I think the story goes, and he said the face looked like Poe.
Interesting. Keith, do you have any more information on exactly where it happened, or any more details?
Well, I know it was right along Benefit Street that sighting occurred, and that whoever it was who bore a striking resemblance to Poe, the professor thought in retrospect very, very similar to to the likeness of Poe. He just mumbled some things incoherently. The only thing the professor could make out was the words conqueror worm, which of course is very significant to Edgar Allan Poe. And right over here, of course, is the house where Sarah Helen Whitman lived. So this whole area is very, very connected to Poe being in Providence, Rhode Island, on the east side.
Conqueror worm, very creepy.
Exactly. And of course, there's the churchyard, the cemetery of the church there, where Edgar Allan Poe actually courted Sarah Helen Whitman. Very romantic in a Gothic sense.
So it certainly wouldn't be surprising that you would see the shade of Poe here on Benefit Street.
Not surprising at all, if you're lucky enough. And so this is, of course, the very cemetery grounds where Edgar Allan Poe courted Sarah Helen Whitman. They actually used to go picnicking here, and this is where he professed his love to her many times.
Well, we can relate, right? Because we've done some cemetery picnicking ourselves. So
Yes.
we have something in common with the couple.
Perhaps not as morbid by their standards as it is by today's standards.
Right. I understand things are a little bit different then.
But this is a beautiful historic cemetery. Very beautiful.
Beautiful spot.
I am stretched upon your grave.